Today's session is economic development for local leaders. We had a great session yesterday on investment readiness, and we're hoping that today will go just as well. I am speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Silic Okanagan people here in the Okanagan, and I'm really happy again to be here. My name's Dale Wielden. I'm President CEO for the British Columbia Economic Development Association. Today's presentation will be between myself and Colleen Bond. I have had a number of years experience in economic development going back to the early 90s in a small rural community and then a larger center in Chilliwack, and then running the BC Economic Development Association, for the last 14 years. So, and then Colleen, what about your background in economic development?
Yeah, I started a few years after you, so sort of mid-90s for me in the central Okanagan here, where you were, they still are actually, a regional function for economic development. So we had a few communities under that umbrella. And for the past 15 years, I've been working on my own with Dale for a few things, with BCEDA for a few things, and just working on economic development things, not only here in BC, but also globally as well. We've been to some exciting places to spread the word.
Yes, we sure have, Colleen. I think the one of the latest things that we did, and it was a partnership between BCEDA and FCM, was to actually design, and the city of Chilliwack, but we designed an economic development for local leaders training session for the country of Cambodia. And it's so cool to watch the work that they're doing in Cambodia as the trainers that we trained are going around the country and doing training. So that's kind of exciting work that we've been able to do. So this economic development series on the next slide, we have a large number of workshops that we're doing: disaster recovery, investment readiness, neighborhood development, ethics, statistics, local leaders, and business retention and expansion. We are releasing manuals on each of these topics, in addition to a manual on business walks that's actually already been released. Ashley will put the link to those manuals in the chat. Not every one of the manuals is in there yet. They will be over the next week or two, and for you to be able to download. So feel free to go over to that site that Ashley puts in, and you'll be able to download the manual. So we talk about 14 things. When we used to do these workshops until this year, and I think it shows how economic development is always a changing profession, if you will, or a changing direction in communities. There's 14 things that we want you to know today, and so we're going to go through those 14 things.
Yeah, when you and I started, Dale, I think there was only 2.
Yes, I think so. All right. So the first item is both community development and economic development, and you know, it's so typical that we've, you know, in the past, how economic development used to be done. And Colleen, you said it. I mean, you were right when you said that, you know, it used to be 2 things, because you typically had another group doing other things. And in today's world, you're doing so much of it is you're doing it all. Local leaders are doing it all, bringing it all together and for the overall good of the community, whether it's attracting new business, whether it's working with existing companies, whether it's, you know, helping that existing company expand, or whether it's attracting a new business to your community. But you're also doing things like housing. I'll get Colleen to talk about the Langford project here shortly. Whether it's trying to attract physicians and nurses, and we're seeing that across the province, not just in rural communities, but in larger centers as well, where we're really struggling with our healthcare system in trying to, attract enough doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals to our communities. And so economic developers are having to get involved in a number of different initiatives. And you think of the company like the one company on the right. We'll talk a little bit more about them maybe under business retention, but this company is Barkman. They're out of Merritt, and this company is building a new facility in Merritt, but the company is based in sort of central Canada. They have facilities all over the place, and they were recognized as one of the best managed companies in the world. And of course, we're in Canada, and as economic developers, we're wanting to work with companies that want to come to our communities. So it's nice to see a project happening in a community like Merritt, where they've located a new facility and are doing things. So again, you've got that typical attraction or working with an existing business, but now you've got healthcare. Economic developers are getting involved in special events, parks and recreation, and other things. Not the TV show type of parks and recreation, but other parks and recreation, and building that community, because without a community, you can't attract business. So, and Colleen, why don't you just quickly explain the home ownership program in Langford?
Yeah, it's a good program, and you're right. A few years back, for sure, that's when economic development really started looking at the housing issue. It really wasn't part of the portfolio for many years. And same with your workforce, which we'll talk about later on as well. But housing certainly has become an issue with economic development, and that seamless crossover into community development as well. So the city of Langford announced a program last October that they realized, just like many communities within BC and across Canada, that they were really facing a housing affordability crisis. So they developed this attainable home ownership program, is what it's called, and it is been developed to provide a maximum of 75% of that 5% down payment for they're focusing on condos. So for condos up to $450,000. So they know that their housing costs, which I believe in Langford, they said averages about $900,000. But they thought, reasonably, people can get out of that rent cycle into those condos at $450,000 maximum, and we can help them with that down payment. So there's other, requirements that you need. You have to have a certain number of years of residency in the area, et cetera, et cetera. But, they're targeting 250 buyers. That's pretty substantial in that community, or in really any community. To be able to help 250 people get into the housing market is pretty incredible. They'll also use a sliding scale based on, the household income and that sort of thing. So I know applications were started sometime this year. So it'll be very interesting to see how that program goes out. And it's something we definitely need to follow up with them on, Dale.
Yeah, for sure. And Colleen, I was thinking while you were talking on another project, and it gives sort of a good example of how communities are dealing with sort of even a healthcare and housing issue, is the new development in Clinton there, where Clinton had the built that seniors facility, and it wasn't just the local government, but there was local government involved, but also a local society, and the economic development officer at the time was sort of involved in trying to help stick handle a lot of the approval processes that took place. So again, diversifying what a community gets involved with to build that community.
And this is an important one, is understanding what your economic development staff. I've been out of economic development in that staff setting for quite a while, but from the some of the EDOs we talked to, this is still a bit of a challenge, that people who have sat on your board for a number of years still are not sure what you do, or perhaps at the council level they're not quite sure what you do as economic development. And part of that challenge is, of course, economic development typically isn't something you can hold in your hand and say, here it is, this is what I did, right? You can't do that. It's more of how you create that long-term environment for prosperity and growth opportunities for your businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So It's really important for you as economic development staff to go to your business community, to go to your community as a whole, to go to your council, all of those folks that are involved, those stakeholders that are involved in your success, and let them know what you do. Let them know what some of the challenges are, maybe how they can help you, but really introduce the concept of economic development is really important in our community, and this is why. And these are the projects that we're working on. And when I was with the commission here in Kelowna those years ago, we found that was really the case. They didn't understand, that our councils didn't understand, the business community didn't really understand, and so we developed a reporting process where we reported on a quarterly basis first, to tell them exactly what we did. Confidentiality, of course, was always maintained. We will always stress the importance of confidentiality in economic development. But once we started doing that and letting the stakeholders know what we were working on, our economic development went from sort of who are you, to being a really, really supported organization in the community, and a real go-to for things that may or may not have been specifically economic development, but that's okay too. But it was a really, we took it upon ourselves to go out and educate about what we did and the importance of it. And I would say, on the flip side, if you are a stakeholder, if you are a member of council or whatever, don't hesitate to go into economic development offices and say, hey, let's sit down and let me know what you're doing. I really want to understand and support you. I think it's really important for success.
Yeah, and I think what our local leaders are looking for is really sort of, what is that, like a general understanding of what they do and what role they're playing. They're not really looking into specific as to what companies you're looking for, or hey, how are you helping XYZ company in the community. That's not really, again, respecting, like you said, that issue of confidentiality. And the other thing that I think that it doesn't really matter what kind of a structure you're operating under. And there's sometimes, communities will look at, oh, we need to do it internally, or we need to, contract it out to the chamber, or we need to have a private corporation that does this. And there's all different types in the province, or there's a regional function. There's all different types. The key thing is understanding, the bottom line is local government's funding it. And so the bottom line is local government, as counselors, or, play a role in trying to understand what that economic development office is doing, or the economic development office sort of talking to their local leaders saying, this is the steps that we're taking to work with the local economy, be it those types of things we were talking about earlier, business retention, or working on a healthcare plan to attract doctors, whatever it is, just sort of highlighting those things. The other thing that we see, Colleen, are staff, more and more economic development staff getting involved in the management teams at local government or the regional district government, so that there's that constant communication between the different departments and economic development, in order to avoid those conflicts that sometimes happen between economic development and, say, planning or finance or engineering or whatever, so that they're all on the same page. They all understand what each other's doing and the roles that they're playing in the community. You need to have a.
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this is, you can start talking about. I was just going to say, this is probably a key component of being able to tell people what it is you do as economic development. But sorry, go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, sorry, having that economic development strategy in place, and it really is, like Colleen said, that key component. It's sort of what pulls everything together, and really defines the programs that you're working with. Now, does a strategy need to be 198 pages? No, it doesn't need to be 198 pages. It could be 20 pages. It could be 10. One of the, like when you look at a place like Venture Kamloops, where they've had a lot of successes, their strategy is a nice, short, to the point strategy. And then, maybe you'll have another strategy in, some other community, maybe it's, Lanaima or whatever, where maybe it's 150 pages, or, not that one's any better than the other, but they don't have to be large and they don't have to be small. It depends on what it is you want out of it and maybe the capacity of the organization and the community. The main thing is it's had some consultation, that you've done some engagement with the community to develop your plan, and that it's bringing together those key things that are items that could help your local community grow a stronger economy. And then the other thing that's really important about an economic development strategy that we think is important anyways, is to having that detailed sort of work plan. What steps do you take? Can you take to make sure that those specific projects are being completed? At least for your first year, and then every year you lay out a new direction. And so we always encourage communities that when they do this, we need to make sure that when you do a strategy, it's laying out those steps that communities should be taking, or the community should be taking to achieve them, who your partners are, who your stakeholders are, and what it is you're trying to achieve. Colleen, any more to add on that?
Yeah, I would only say, the consultation piece, as you mentioned, Dale, is really crucial to having buy-in from your community and the, the funders and stakeholders that are involved in your economic development organization. But also, being really honest about where you are as a community. What are your strengths, but also being really honest about what are those weaknesses, and not looking at them, solely as weaknesses and saying, oh geez, well, we'll never do this. But how do you flip those around, right? How do you take advantage and turn those weaknesses into something that you can develop a program around, or an initiative around, and make it into a strength, or make it into an opportunity. But it really has to be an honest evaluation of what your current situation is as a community, and where it is you want to go over the next 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years out. As economic development for strategies, I think both Dale and I agree that anything more than 5 years, and I would say probably 3 years is a better time for your strategy, but anything more than that, things just change so dramatically over those times. And it's been proven just in the last number of years, right? So we know things just change too dramatically over a 5+ years. So, some of those strategies that we've seen that were 20 years out, they're really not too useful after year 3 or 4 or 5. So that's just the time area that we would put on that.
I think that's a really, really, Colleen, just continuing on that, that's a really good comment about the time. And I think we only have to look back we go back to 2008 when the world economy crashed. We go back to COVID, the start of COVID, and when everything crashed. Strategies made just before that, likely got stalled in so many ways, or the directions had to change to reflect the current needs of the community. And that's the other thing that's important, is it's really a piece of paper, and it always has to change. And now a strategy that maybe you did during COVID you might have to pause some of that because of now maybe a global recession that might be happening. So, we need to factor in all of those things. I think Teresa has a question here from Tumbler Ridge, Colleen, that they're at the end of the strategy and they already have a year full of projects and objectives. Is there value in getting it collated professionally from our work plan to an actual strategy? My thoughts on that, and feel free to have a different opinion there, Colleen, but my thoughts on that are, I guess it depends on whether your council or whether your stakeholders are really looking for that. If you need support in buying into your work plan, then yeah, it does make sense to do that. And most consultants will come in and sort of look at what you're doing now and incorporate that into your economic development strategies so that you can keep that momentum going. Colleen?
Yeah, I would totally agree with you on that. It is really important to have that consistency of your strategy, and at the end of our strategy, there never really is an end, is it, right? So you're just beginning again with another year added on. So you've done some great work up in Tumbler Ridge, and I'm so glad to see communities that have their strategies and are implementing them, because that's always such a heartache to me, that communities spend 20, 40, 50, 60, 100,000, I don't care what the amount of money is, for a strategy, and they don't have the capacity to implement anything. So that strategy just sits there. And we've seen it so many times. So please, when you are looking to do your strategy, think of that capacity. Think of what it is you can actually do on the ground. Having the strategy that just sits there, forget about it, right? Like, just it drives me nuts.
It's called the SPOT, Colleen, the strategic plan on the shelf.
Yes.
Yeah. Colleen, what does it mean here?
Well, just being realistic about your readiness. Yesterday, we did have the webinar on investment readiness, but this is even more than that too. This is just be realistic about your economic development readiness, not only just investment from the outside, but again, going back to that capacity that I just talked about. What is the capacity, and what are you able to actually do for economic development on the ground? What are the programs that you realistically can do because of staff, because of your budget? Who are your partners that you can pull in to help with it? So it's really important, especially with communities that may be just starting economic development. Maybe it's been sitting idle for a little while, or maybe they're just putting a new focus on, whatever the reason. Make sure you really are coordinated and educate those stakeholders about what you really are ready for as a community. So for instance, if you have an economic development, you're in a small community, and maybe you work 12 hours a week on economic development, right? And the rest of your time you're doing a bunch of other things. It's pretty unrealistic to say you're ready to attract a 100-person tech firm, or you're ready to go to trade shows to talk about expansion in your downtown business core, that sort of thing. So just be really realistic and honest about how ready you are for economic development, for readiness, for helping your businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's and that's good. And I think just referring to yesterday's presentation and looking at that manual and running that self-assessment and seeing how close you are to being ready, and then incorporating some of that into your strategy as well is a really useful exercise. Next slide. It's really important as we plan our communities or in how we do our day-to-day programming around our economic development, is to really take into consideration what are our regional assets. Your communities likely can't have necessarily everything, and that could even be said for maybe it's the city of Vancouver or Burnaby or Surrey or Fort St. James and Vanderhoof, or so on and so on. I mean, we can add all our communities together, and maybe one has land and the other doesn't have land. Maybe one has industrial buildings in it and the other one doesn't available. Do we want to chase those investments away, or do we look at, wondering, where can we direct people to make sure that we keep them in our areas? When when you look at that picture of the airport there in Smithers, Smithers is servicing a large number of communities all at once. Maybe it's Burns Lake with regular scheduled flights, or Houston are going to Smithers or the indigenous communities in the area, or maybe Nisco or flying out of Terrace, or those are regional airports. They're not just that community's airport, they're regional airports. That's a regional asset, and you're all benefiting from it. Maybe it's a hospital, maybe that, I used to live in Lillooet, and the Lillooet Hospital, was servicing Braylorn, Goldbridge, and all of the Stotlium Nation. And it was, so that hospital wasn't just servicing Lillooet, even though it was in Lillooet, it was a regional asset. So you've got to talk about those things. I remember when I was working in Chilliwack, we would use, and I believe they still do, sort of, what is that regional population? That regional population is my workforce. That regional population is not just my community for the population of my workforce, but the regional population makes up that workforce. So we used to count basically everything from the bridge out as our population, because people would travel that far to work. And we've seen that in many instances with some of the companies that we were able to work with to help expand or to attract new ones to the community. And Colleen?
Yeah, I think that's really important to do that. And, you know, one exercise that I think communities should do at some level is an asset inventory. And really sit down with the people in your community and sort of maybe look at, I would say, sort of an hour circumference. It used to be about 45 minutes, but I would say about an hour circumference. And what are those assets that are there that you can call your own as well? You know, you gave the hospital example. It's exactly here. I live in West Kelowna, so of course the Kelowna hospital is an asset for my community. But I would also say Penticton Hospital, which is about just less than 40 minutes down the road from me, is also an asset. And the reason I would say that, even though Kelowna is closer, is because I know that if something happened for medical, that I have to do something medical, I can get into Penticton much, much, much faster, not time-wise, but surgery-wise, that sort of weight-wise, much faster than I can in Kelowna. So that would be an asset for me. And I don't know how often we think about these things, but it's so important to understand what your assets are for investment attraction, for your labor force, as Dale was saying, for resident attraction. It goes on for so many different components of this. And the one real quick one there is Oyster Bay. And in 2003, there, Oyster Bay is located on the island right beside Ladysmith. And in 2003, the chief there said that he had a goal to build a town. It was going to take him 20 years and he was going to build a town. And he has. I don't know if anybody has gone down that corridor in the last couple of years, but there's a lot going on there. He's got they've got the hotel, the marina, they're building residential units, assisted living, they've got commercial, retail. So that definitely is an asset for Ladysmith right down the road from them. You know, they need to really promote that in any of their materials out for attraction of, as I said, investment, labor, or residents.
Sure, and Ladysmith's businesses are benefiting from those types of investments, right, that are happening. So,
yeah.
And developing those strong partnerships, you know, you can't do economic development alone. You can't just do you can't just do it yourself. And you know, it's an unfortunate reality. You can't depend on just your local community to be doing economic development, or the sole economic developer being in the community doing it. Or even a council member just off the side of their desk. You know, it's hard. It's important to include many partners, and because of that, partnerships, you're building strength, be it in human resources, financial resources. You're actually looking better to outsiders looking in, or even funding agencies looking in and supporting your economic development initiatives. Are you working regionally? Do you have a strong partnership base that you're working with? We've got a number of examples here. One is in the Kootenays, where, you know, Imagine Kootenays has been around for a number of years. It brings together sort of a number of the communities in the Kootenays that work together towards encouraging the live and the work, and, you know, and the play, but more the live and the work, you know, what it's like to live here, how to find out about living here, what it's like to work here, and what's it like to invest here. What are the, you know, what communities have what assets? But again, regionally, they all have those assets. So, you know, it's a good structured program that Imagine Kootenays has done. And then you have the Fraser Valley Alliance, which is a partnership, I believe, of a number of Fraser Valley communities in working together. I think it's on technology as their primary focus, and they've done a strategy around it and how are we going to do it. But they're all working together on it and trying to do some common things in their communities to achieve that success. Colleen?
Yeah, the other one here, just briefly, the dock is in Port Alberni, and they converted, it was about 17 or 18,000 square foot former fish plant that was vacant for 10 years or so. And what they wanted to do was to turn that into a food and innovation sort of processing hub. And they know that, without partnerships, that would not have worked. So they had more than 7 or 8 different partners, including, of course, the city, the First Nations, the Port Authority right there as well, private industry. And it didn't happen overnight, but once they got those partnerships in place, things started to roll, along fairly quickly, if you will. Funding started to come to them because, again, like you said, Dale, organizations, ministries, federal governments, they want to see those partnerships if they're going to provide dollars to a community. It's really important for them to see how you're working together to achieve mutual goals. So that's been a great success for Port Alberni.
Yeah, and I think, Colleen, you said the province, and that's something that we didn't mention here, but communities need to partner with the province as well on their economic development initiatives, and especially if they're looking at attraction or retention of businesses or attraction of businesses. There are great staff within the Ministry of Jobs and Economic Recovery and Innovation, and they can help you, and many of them are at the regional level, whether it's say Larry Olson in the Okanagan, or whether it's Miles runs in the Kamloops Merritt region, or whether it's I don't know, can't remember all the names here off the top of my head, but it's it's important to engage with those people both here and in Vancouver at the sort of ministry office in downtown Vancouver, because they'll have sector experts, they have geographic experts, they have people that can help you, either maybe it's reach new markets for your companies, or their marketing for investment into the province. They need to know where to direct those investment leads. So again, Ashley just posted the regional economic operations branch staff listing there. Reach out to those people if you haven't, and let them know exactly what it is that you're looking for. Colleen?
Yeah, and they want to be reached out to. We had great here in Kelowna. We had really good success doing that, those sort of partnerships, and just staying in touch with them, whether we visited them down in their offices or they've come through here. But they really do want to be contacted and really want to know what's happening in your community and how they can help, for sure. The next one we want to talk about is the foundational pieces that you need to have in place. And these include things like your community investment profile, your website, that sort of thing. The middle one, we're bringing up Tumbler Ridge again here, but Tumbler Ridge, a few years ago, they did specific sector sheets for the different sectors that they were targeting. This one here is on healthcare, and what I really liked about what they did is they had the actual opportunities that were available. So it wasn't just a broad call out to say come and invest in Tumbler Ridge. It said come and invest in Tumbler Ridge, and here are the opportunities that are available for you. Here are the specific opportunities. So I think they had one on the resource industry, healthcare, tourism, virtual workers, and I know I'm missing one, Dale, but I can't think of it. And your community profile, we if you didn't see the seminar or the webinar yesterday on investment readiness, we do talk about that. So catch it on. I know Ashley's put that webinar information in as well, but your profile really needs to tell the story of who you are as a community. So there's definitely some of the numbers and statistics and demographics that you need to have in there to give that story. But it's also about the visual aspect. It's also about some of those softer type of assets that you have or advantages that you have to help sell your community, because it's not just investors that are looking at your community. It is residents, right? It is labor force that's coming. So there's different audiences for your profile, and it should be addressed to all of those ones to really tell an overall story of why your community is the best community to live in. And I mentioned it in the webinar, but I think it's so important to have those testimonials included, whether it's on your website or in your profile. And you can see there's one there on Tumbler Ridge there by the doctor. It's important for them to tell people why. Because I think when we all visit communities, whether we're tourists or what, we usually sit and chat with people and say, oh, well, you know, how long have you lived here? What do you love about living here? And those are the stories that you like to hear, that really tell you the story of that community. So I encourage you to make sure that those testimonials, that you seek them out and put them on your promotional materials.
I think the other one maybe was remote workers. I mean, Tumbler Ridge was sort of ahead of itself in attracting, healthcare workers, remote workers, those types of, seeing those as part of steps to diversify their economy. And of course, Cranbrook, if you look at Cranbrook lately, they've done a number of really interesting initiatives, brought in some interesting businesses. And so I'd encourage you to look at their website. That's, the links are on their website that really highlights the community. But again, it all goes back to every single one of these communities is doing it, is telling their story. You can't just have statistics. Statistics are important, and some will put more of a priority into that than others. Bottom line is you don't need a great big library of statistics. If you watch the webinar from yesterday, you'll see what those statistics should be. And then put that into your profile, but make sure your profile is telling the story. And I agree, Colleen, it's so important, so important to use testimonials for sure. Yeah. Engaging your business community. And one of the, we talk about this a lot, and both Colleen and I actually, we do instruct for actually the International Economic Development Council. Next week, we actually have Laith Wardy, who is the primary instructor for the International Economic Development Council, doing a webinar next week on business retention and expansion. But this really should be your number one priority in a community, and that is, and I don't know about, every economic development office is different. Some are, working on different things, but I can remember going back to the days of when I first started off in Lillooet, that was something that we really tried to focus on, was working with the existing businesses that you have, rather than just focusing on attracting investment externally. We've talked about investment readiness. It goes both ways, whether you're attracting an investor from the outside or whether you're attracting an investor from the inside, whether you're helping that business expand. That middle picture there is when the reconstruction of the Burns Lake Mill happened, and again, it goes back to helping that company rebuild and making sure that they stay in the community, and working, in this case, working with the local Indigenous communities, the local government, and the company themselves out of Oregon, to make sure that mill was rebuilt, people were put back to work, and the economy was still being supported. We can't forget these businesses in our community. We can't just, there's a lot of small mom and pop operations, as you see on the right there. This is, in a downtown BC community, which I won't mention, but it's important, and they're out there talking with them. We've often talked about business walks, and business walks is, a lot of communities will say, we've done a business walks. Well, again, a business walks is really part of a broader business retention and expansion program. It shouldn't be your only step. You can't just go and talk to businesses through business walks and think you're done. You need that follow-up exercise. You need to make sure that you've got partners that you can refer businesses to when you identify what their challenges might be or what their opportunities might be. So it's important to go out and talk to your existing businesses. And it really, in our view, at least, it should be one of or your top economic development priority. Colleen?
Yeah, we could talk for days, and in fact, we do sometimes on business, engaging with your local businesses for sure. It's so important for successful economic development, I think. And And hand in hand with that is the entrepreneurial environment, and making sure that you have an environment in place to help entrepreneurs start their businesses and to succeed, and you have different partners and stakeholders that will help you with the goal. There's lots of different programs out there. Some of them are getting more advanced, I guess, in their criteria and development than just the lemonade stand that used to be a popular one for economic development. But the middle one there is I'll just address that really quick. It's just an example. Is really good. It's in Campbell River, and they do a next tech stream tech. Is that what it's called? Next stream tech. What? Yeah. I always confuse it. I'm sorry, but if somebody's from Campbell River please correct me. But it's a partnership with the city of Campbell River and the Campbell River Angel Group. It's in its third year now, and it's really about fostering entrepreneurship, and it's open to individuals or businesses across BC. It's not just restricted to Campbell River, and they've had over the 3 years they've had 200 businesses and over $3 million that they've put in, invested, or donated directly into program finalists. There's just one of the finalists that was earlier announced this year, and they have different categories that are really quite interesting. And one is the creative industries and tourism. There's a food security, health and emergency preparedness, sustainable resource management. There's a wild card category, which I think is really cool, a community stream, that sort of thing. So it's a really successful program. There's lots of information that you can find on how they do it and who all's involved, but it's really successful, and they've done a great job. The other one I'll touch upon is on the right-hand side, and that is a new one. It's Bear's Lair, and so it's set up similar to Dragon's Den, but it's for Indigenous communities. It just started. It's on the APN network. So it just started. I think the first show was last week or maybe the week before. And it's just entrepreneurs. So they'll have 18 Indigenous entrepreneurs who get to share up to about $180,000 to them. There's four. These are the four core bears, if you will. And the winner gets $100,000. There's mentorship opportunities. There's a resource center that they get involved with. So there's so much more going on than just here's some money, off you go. They are really invested in making sure these entrepreneurs are successful long-term by investing in them, as I said, through mentorships, through webinars, through a whole bunch of other things. It's really, really a really cool show. If you have time to watch it, I would really recommend it. Thanks, Ashley, for putting those both in.
Yeah, and the other one, Colleen, is like on the Venture Kamloops. Venture Kamloops has done some very innovative programs. I'd encourage you to look at their website to look at and under their Our programs, and you'll see a number of programs that are really focused at entrepreneurs and existing businesses. They've done, the Venture Kamloops Advisors program is really focusing on on the entrepreneurs or an existing business, and these businesses they apply to be part of it. It allows those entrepreneurs to pitch their business ideas to a group of local business professionals and industry experts. Then they provide their sort of constructive feedback, and they maybe can create connections. It's all free to the businesses. The businesses don't pay for this. It's to help those businesses get to that next level. And it really is something like that doesn't cost money to even do. So your communities can be doing this, whether you're in an Indigenous community, a local, small rural community, or a larger center. You can all be doing these types of programs because they don't have to cost you a lot of money. And on the BREE side of it, the one thing that I didn't mention that I wanted to mention is as an example was Etsy BC, as Etsy's funding business advisors through the Etsy region in a number of communities, and they're not only providing the funding for these advisors, and these advisors are going out and working with businesses and helping them overcome their challenges, and working with the local economic development offices and chambers and community futures to work and resolve the challenges and issues and help those businesses, capitalize on opportunities. But ETSI is also providing support for a business retention and expansion tool to allow them to inventory all of the data that they collect and operate as sort of a CRM to gather more information or to share information with the businesses in each of the communities that are participating. Okay.
Yeah, workforce and economic development. Over the years, this has certainly become something that economic development has definitely gotten into. Again, way back when, it just wasn't something that wasn't an economic development initiative. Really, it was seen as those agencies who were involved in workforce, they did it, right? But economic development, we have certainly seen how we need to be involved with it and to work in partnership with those agencies. And there's lots of things that economic development can do in working with those agencies. And here's a couple of really good examples of what we're doing and what some communities are doing. Accelerate Okanagan. I mentioned this on the webinar yesterday, but it's a really good one. But I think a lot of times we don't have data specific to our area. So at Accelerate Okanagan said, we don't really know what the wage salaries are here. What's the range that we are being paid or our staff is being paid, our tech companies in particular are being paid. And we want to know because it's important for the attraction of new labor, and it's important for the attraction of investment and expansion with our existing businesses as well. So they just started in the last week or so to do a survey of local businesses and just find out exactly what the salary ranges are for specific positions. I know when I was in at the community level, that was a question I got an awful lot. Is what does this particular occupation pay? What does this particular? And I'd have some of the data, but I didn't have it at the local level enough to be what I thought was the real numbers. So I think it's a great initiative that Accelerate Okanagan is doing, and any community could certainly do that. The other one there is Merit. That was a year, I guess 2 years, I think ago. They work the community futures there, and Work BC looked to see what are the specific workforce opportunities in Merritt and the surrounding regions, and what is happening now, and sort of what is going to be looked for in the future as well to diversify the economy, but also to satisfy what the current situation is. So again, that was a great partnership. We talked about partnerships earlier. It's a great partnership. It's a great initiative to find out what those specific opportunities are that you need fulfilled in your own community. And Dale, if you want to talk about the Shuswap Hub.
Sure, Colleen. The Shuswap Hub really sort of came about as I guess as a result of COVID and sort of even maybe a little bit before that, was to really link employers and employees together. But maybe people can, businesses can post their job postings, employers and employees can post resumes, trying to find those matches. But it also links employers and employees to different resources available in the community, be it Work BC, who are playing such important roles in the communities that they're in, or other, maybe it's the local college, university, those types of things. Right now, BCEDA is actually working with, thanks to some support that we were able to get from the Red Cross, we're building these sites with the company that does this for Princeton and Merritt as a result of the flooding. So again, it gives each of those communities a tool to be able to bring people back to the community and to make sure that their businesses have the labor force that they need. Next slide. using tourism assets is so important in economic development. You know, when a visitor comes to the community, I would encourage you, I'm not sure if the video is out there anymore, but there used to be a program called the Value of Tourism, and it was a Tourism Vancouver Island initiative, and I believe Destination BC, on the value of tourism, and it really explained, you know, a visitor coming to the community. They enjoy the community so much, they decide, hey, I can do business here. I want to move here. I want to live here. And so use those tourism assets to really encourage people to come to your communities. And I'm a kind of an example of that too. Recently moved to the Okanagan and in Penticton, and the you know, and really we used to come up here and we used to, you know, always liked it up here, but you know, all of a sudden we got to that point where we went, you know, like we want to start looking at things, and we decided on Penticton and the Okanagan to move, just simply because what we liked about the Okanagan was, we liked the people, we liked the downtowns, we liked the lake, and okay, maybe we liked the breweries and the wineries, but it was all good. But we used those assets. The farmers market kind of sold us on the community, because we realized of what was around, and we got a better understanding of the community by just attending simply a farmer's market. And if you look in a place like Lillooet on the left-hand side, and you have the Bridge River fishing rocks, and the Bridge River Indian Band is you know, has it set up where people can watch the indigenous communities fish, and I believe they used to do a food truck there. I haven't been there for a couple of years. There are some barbecuing of different things, and talking about the process of fishing. And but again, you're capturing people. Your people are learning about the community. Or Mile Zero in Dawson Creek, or the Malahat Skywalk there on the right side. All of these are sort of highlighting your communities. And the other way to use those tourism assets, and Colleen and I have talked about this over and over and over again, is, you know, packaging these assets, talking about them, and putting them in your hotel rooms, along with other economic development information about investing in the community, about living in the community, so that when somebody comes to your community to spend some times, you know, be it in your hotel rooms or in your short-term rentals, promote the community for them to stay, to live, and to stay longer in the community and spending money.
Yeah, I still love that idea, and if there is a community that's doing it, and you're on the webinar right now, please let us know, because we do talk about that an awful lot. It's such a simple thing to do. I mean, even if you just put in your sector sheets that show you what opportunities exist into the hotel rooms, or you know, another one we talk about, and I don't think anybody has done yet, but again, please correct me if I'm wrong, and you're on the line doing it, is you mentioned the farmers market, is, you know, have a booth as economic development, or as the city, have a booth there and talk to people going through, because a lot of times they're tourists. It's not just locals going through the farmers market, especially in Penticton, as you mentioned, Dale, but have your booth there to talk about what it's like to live and do business in that community. I think it's a great, easy initiative that can be done, you know, very cost effectively, but you know, can really have some great value for your community. And then we want to talk about being motivated and celebrating those small wins. I think as economic development, sometimes, you know, we think, what have you, or here, you know, what have you done for me lately? And it can get disheartening sometimes, right? You kind of like, geez, I just did this, and this, but oh, okay. So make sure you celebrate those small wins. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about near the beginning of communicating what your economic development staff does, right? So when you celebrate those small wins, maybe you have just developed your community profile. That's a small win. So put it out to your community to let them know that you've done it, why you've done it, you know, encourage that discussion to keep going on about what it is you do. When you do a strategy, let people know what your strategy is all about. What are those focus items you're doing as a community or as a region? It's really important to bring that out, not only for your own sake, to say, okay, I am doing stuff, I am moving along, but to get that support from your community and other stakeholders within your community. So I definitely encourage you to do some of those small wins and let people know. Blow your own horn for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. And that is something that we don't do very well in the economic development industry. And in many ways, that is why council doesn't always know maybe what it is that the economic development function is doing. So measuring that success.
Yeah, measure your success. Go ahead, Dale, sorry.
So measuring the success is, you know, something that's really important. And again, it goes back to that whole accountability, but not only for your function, or not only for the economic development function, but maybe other functions within the community. Simple things that you can do. You know, it's simple to say. It's simple to say that you can, you know, you measure the number of building permits, or you can measure the number of business licenses. And it's simple to say that because those are easy things to say, hey, we've got, you know, 500 business licenses this year and 490. So our economic development office is failing. We might as well just get rid of them. And that's not necessarily the case. And we can, again, as we talked about earlier, when you're doing your strategies and you're looking at, you know, the world economy changes or COVID happens. So is that the economic development staff's fault, or is it council's fault that happened, or is it because it's a global thing and your community is being impacted, so maybe you just need to change? So it's important to not just focus on those things, but look at other areas that you can measure your success. A simple one is a business walks. How, you know, what's the level of satisfaction of your local businesses? What are their needs? Maybe their needs are up or down as to what you need, but again, you're gathering that input and then targeting or creating your work plan around that. And then you're measuring the success of your work plan. Have you accomplished what you laid out to do? Have you done those brochures? Have you attended those trade shows? Have you met with 50 businesses in your community over the last year? You need to, you know, develop realistic success measures in your community so that you can measure it.
Yeah, I think, you know, as you mentioned, business walks are great, but you only get really surface information. You know, with a more detailed, formalized business retention and expansion program, you really can get that information from your businesses that will help you measure about what your community is doing. You can really find out, you know, what are the employment levels today, and then go back a year later and say, okay, now my employment numbers or the business employment numbers are this. You can measure by employment numbers. You can measure by salary. You can measure by the expansions and the dollars that businesses are putting in to their own expansion. There's so many different things that you can get the actual numbers on in your own community through a more formalized business retention program that you just can't get anywhere else. So if you're looking to measure your success, I'm going to say you really need to have a business retention program to really be able to say, these are the numbers that are real for my community.
Yeah. And Ryan just made a comment there, Colleen, just
yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. I'm a huge fan of farmers markets, but I'm also a fan of a community market over the farmers market. Not over, but in addition to the farmers market, you know, highlighting, of course, the agriculture producers in our communities and even processors, and then within a farmers market, and shopping locally like that, but also the community market. So like one of the things that I do like about what Penticton's doing, and I'm sure other communities are doing this, is not just bring in the farmers, but also other small entrepreneurs and businesses, because it is an incubator. It is something that you know, helps these businesses grow and get to that next level and employ more people as well, and creating more value in the community than what they've already have. One last slide, Colleen. I think this is number 14 for those of you that have been paying attention. This is number 14. We think this is extremely important, and I think we only have to look at 2017 and the wildfires that happened then, 2018, 2019, 2021. We've had wildfires that have created havoc all over the province. We have had flooding last November in southern BC that impacted so many communities, and realistically, we're not prepared to rebuild the economy. It does take a team. It isn't just as simple as having an emergency response plan. No matter how we think about it, it's not just that simple. And we need to do so much more. We do offer full day workshops on this topic. That's not what the point of this is. The point is you need to plan. Tomorrow's there's a 1-hour session on resiliency and recovery. We'll talk through some of those plan components. We have a lot of resources, a new one that we've launched and updated. We encourage you to look at those. Colleen and I have done, along with the International Economic Development Council, who has given us incredible support over the years, along with the province and BCEDA, we've done disaster recovery work literally all over the world. And the common thing, Colleen, is that communities really weren't prepared. From an economy standpoint, we're well prepared in most cases to deal with life and injury and evacuation of people, but we're not really prepared when it comes to rebuild that economy afterwards, and we need to plan for that and include that in our response plans. So anything else to add on that before we close off here, Colleen?
Nope. Join us tomorrow, and like Dale said, we'll give you some of the components to get your plan going. We really encourage it.
Yeah, we hope to we're talking and hoping to partner with the province again to be able to travel the province after this next round of municipal elections and host full day economic development for local leaders workshops, and we'll be releasing some information on that soon. And they're really useful to bring together regional people. So I hope that you'll be able to join one of those too, or one of our sessions tomorrow and the ones next week. So thanks very much, everybody. We are 3 minutes over time, and apologize, but glad you could all stay. Bye now.
Thanks.